Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today for this webinar about Twinmotion to Unreal Engine. My name is Martin, I'm Twinmotion Technical Marketing Specialist. I will be taking care of the first part of this webinar. And I'm joined also by Sam Anderson, our Technical Marketing Manager at Epic Games, who will take care of the most interesting part of the webinar, which will be like the actual demo directly inside Unreal. So let's get right into Twinmotion to show you the project we will be using today. So this is it's this office space that we can see here. It's an old factory that has been revamped as a small office space. The scene is pretty basic, but before we switch that to Unreal Engine, I just want to give you a quick rundown of how the scene is set up. So we just open the scene graph and show you the hierarchy. So you have obviously the starting ground, which is the plane on which the geometry has been imported. We have the project itself. So let's hide everything else. So this is just the basic project without any lighting. Outside of the windows, what I did for this project is just create a simple geometry, a simple plane, like you can see over here, on which I apply a glow material. It's pretty basic. It's just to avoid the need of like adding details around the project. For this specific project, I just wanted to focus on the interior space. So I just added this basic geometry on which I apply this glow material. So we have just this nice lighting, this nice glow effect behind the windows. After importing the project, I set up the light. So the light setup is also pretty simple. So we have one area light in front of each windows. So if I select the one over here, let's actually hide all the lights and turn them on one at a time. So we have one light per window, like here, those two. Then we have 4 windows on the ceilings. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this is all the area light. Then we added some Omni light for those 3 lights over here, and we have also some Omni light on the back there. And finally, we also added some spotlight for all the ceiling lamps that you can see over here. Let's just turn them on also. Next thing after the light was to add some probes. So the probes is just to change a bit the reflection. So if you have a look, for example, at the computer screen or the framing on the wall. So without the probe, we don't have any information actually. So when you turn the probe on, you can see clearly what's happening behind the camera. And how the probes are set up, let me select them. So we have multiple probes at the middle of the room, in the middle of the space, like we can see here. Pretty basic. Next, we have a few decals. Decals was especially added behind some of the furniture to ground them a bit more on the floor. So it's just some fake shadow decal that has been added behind some of the desk, behind the ping pong table, behind some of the furniture here. And finally, we just added more detail to the scene with some props that are present inside Twinmotion native library, like we have the plants, some magazine, some more details on the desk themselves, like new computer, some paperwork. And that's pretty much it for this scene. So now, the most interesting part will be how we can turn this scene to the next level. Well, recently, just before the end of the year, before end of 2020, we added on the Unreal Engine Marketplace a new plugin that allows you to open your Twinmotion scene directly in an Unreal project. So let's check that and let's see how you can install those plugins. To install those plugins, first you need to launch the Epic Games Launcher. Once the Epic Games Launcher is open, you need to go to the Unreal Engine tab and open the Marketplace. In the search bar here, I will just type Twinmotion. And here we have the Twinmotion importer for Unreal Engine. So let's open that. Here we have a couple of information. This feature right now is in beta. Not everything is supported. So we'll see that how it works in a moment. To download this plugin, you simply need to click on the button external link that will open this box drive in which you can find the different plugins for Unreal 426 and 425. You will also find the instruction PDF and a few different links to help us develop and keep working on the project. So you can tell us what you think by filling this survey. You can also discuss that on our forum using this link. And you can also, if you encounter any problems, you can follow the instruction here to upload the files you are having some problem with. So here I've already downloaded the 426 plugin, and I will just download the PDF instruction, and then we'll see together how you can set this up. So the PDF has just been downloaded. Let's open this. In this PDF, you will find plenty of useful information for setting up your project, the why we are doing this and for who. You can take the time to read through all the documents. Right now, I'll just focus on how you can install this. It's pretty basic. When you download it, it's a zip file. Once you unzip it, you will find 3 different folders, and you will simply need to move those 3 different folders either in your installation folder of Unreal Engine of your 425 or 426 version, or you can also move those folders inside your current project. So today what I'm going to do is the option 1. I will copy the content of those 3 folders present in my zip file into where I've installed 425. So let's check that out. So here I just opened on the left the content of my zip file, which is those 3 different folders. And here we have the installation folder of Unreal 426. So I'll just open 426. I will come to Engine. I will come to Plugins. And here is the first time I'm installing those plugins. So we'll need here to create a folder called Twinmotion. And I will simply move those 3 folders in my Twinmotion folder. It's that simple to enable those plugins. So now that's done, let's come back to the Epic Games Launcher. First, how you can install Unreal Engine. It's pretty simple. Here you have the engine version. You simply need to click on the plus button to add a new version. Here you will need to select the version you want to install. In this case, I want to install 426, but it's already installed. If not, it will be in this list here. You will just select the version you want and click on install. Once installed, you simply need to click on the Launch button to launch the application. So for that, I will start a new blank project. Let's start with one of the templates we have here and select the Arch-VIZ one. And don't really need the starting content, and we'll need the ray tracing, but Sam will cover that in more details later. So now that's done, let me just click on the Manage plugin. As you can see, it detects that there is some new plugins available. In the search bar, I will just type Twinmotion, and here I have my 3 plugins that correspond to the 3 folders that I've moved in the plugin folder. I will just enable those 3 plugins. And it's telling me Unreal Editor must be restart, so I'll just click on Restart Now to restart my project. So as you can see here, the 3 plugins are well enabled. And now let me pass on the baton to Sam that will guide you on how now you can open your Twinmotion scene in Unreal and how you can just push it to the next level. Thank you everyone, and now Sam, take it away.
Thank you, Martin, for getting that nice Twinmotion file set up for us. I know I am personally very excited for this importer, so let's dive in. As you can see here, I have the Arch-VIZ template that Martin opened up. These templates are great for providing a basic starting point. they are going to have certain settings enabled and contain elements that are going to set you up to have a successful project. Now, I won't be going in depth over user interface in this webinar, but will walk you all through the steps to get a basic project into Unreal. If you are brand new to Unreal, it would be worth going through the Unreal Online Learning Portal for more UI and project management information. Now, before I get started, I'm going to delete a few things to get a fresh start. I'll go ahead and remove the geometry in the notes by going to the World Outliner window on the top right-hand side. Select Notes, hold down Shift, select Terrain, right-click, Edit, and Delete. To import the Twinmotion file, I'm going to use this Datasmith button in the middle of the screen. Now, if you are familiar with the Datasmith workflow for other software, you might be used to having to export to a Datasmith file and then import. The great thing about this plugin is I can use the Twinmotion file as is. So I select this here, hit OK, and it's asking me where do I want to place this project. Content will do just fine, so I'll hit OK. And then another settings dialog box is going to pop up. And it's going to give me some settings that I might use in the future if I want to bake my lighting. But with this project, we will be using ray tracing, so I'm going to keep the defaults as is and hit Import. Now, as I mentioned, we are going to be showcasing ray tracing, which will give the project a more natural look. It's going to produce soft shadows and accurate ambient occlusion. It's also going to give us interactive reflections, which can be very important in representing materials in architecture. If you do not have a graphics card that supports ray tracing, or if performance is a very important part of your project for virtual reality, you can start the template without ray tracing enabled and continued by baking your lighting. Okay, once it is imported, a window may pop up containing some information about the import process. I'll go ahead and close this window as it shouldn't affect our project. But you'll see that the project is very zoomed out. I'll go ahead and select an object from the World Outliner on the right-hand side, perhaps one of these books, hit F to zoom into the geometry. Now, let's take a look at the project and see how it imported. Looks like the textures and materials all came in quite nicely. But let's set up some features in Unreal that will take this project to the next level. As mentioned, I'll be showing the setup for ray tracing and lighting. Then I'll go through the post-process volume, how to make edits to the model, and lastly, what is possible to achieve with some of the new features from Unreal 4.26. To get started, I'm going to turn on ray tracing. I'll go to the top left-hand corner, hit Edit, Project Settings, and then I'm going to look for Platform, Windows. I'm going to be looking for this DirectX 12 under Default RHI. So this is the rendering hardware interface that will work best for ray tracing. I'll then search at the top bar for ray tracing. And I'm going to make sure that this is enabled here. So if you followed Martin for setting up the project, these should already be set. And I can make sure that the ray tracing is enabled by closing out of this window, going to the viewport options here under Lit, and making sure that that path tracing is there. I also just wanted to bring this to your attention that there are different viewports that you can use, so whatever works best for your workflow. I'll go back to Lit. And I'm going to go hit Show and turn off the grid here so that I have a nice clean floor plate to work with. So now that I have everything in, ray tracing turned on, I'm going to set up some views. So they're called bookmarks, and what I'll be doing is getting to a view that I like. I'll hold down Control 1, and now I'll go to a different spot of the project. Hit Control 2, and now when I press 1 and 2, it will toggle between these two views. So the Control button allows you to initially set those, but you can also do that by going to the top left-hand corner, selecting the drop-down button, Going to Bookmarks, Set Bookmark, and then you'll be able to jump between the two that you set up. Now I'm going to add in 2 lights to the space. So I'll go to the lights on the left-hand side, go to Rect Light, drag and drop that in. So you'll see that when I brought this in, a gizmo came in with it. Now on my keyboard, when I hit W, E, and R, it's toggling between transforming, rotating, and scaling, which will be helpful in manipulating assets in Unreal. So I'm going to rotate it -90 degrees. Now you'll see that it's snapping at every 10 degrees. You can control this in the top right-hand corner. So you'll see there's some orange buttons here. If I click it, it's going to allow me to rotate freely. However, I like to have it with the snapping on, so I'll turn that back on. And you can see that I have control over some of the increments here. So I'd encourage you to take a look at these and pick the ones that work best for your speed and workflow. So I'm going to hit W one more time and then drag this light over to the edge in front of the windows. I'm going to go to the details panel on the right-hand side, and I'm going to put the intensity to 1000. And I want to make sure that the light is facing the correct direction. So it looks like it is. If I rotate it all the way around, you'll see it's facing outdoors. So we'll keep it facing the correct way. Now I'm going to bring it up to the window, and I'm going to change the source width in the details panel on the right to 250 and the height to 150 so that this covers that whole window. Now there's going to be 2 settings that are crucial for ray tracing lighting, and one of them is going to be the mobility. So if I go to the details panel, you'll see that I have static, stationary, and movable all as different options. So static is going to be your most cost-effective. It's going to be great for if you have a project that has no moving parts and you really want to nail down the lighting. Stationary is going to be good if you have a few moving elements. Say you have your lighting set, but you're going to want to control the color of the lighting. Now, movable is going to be best for us. We're going to be working with ray tracing. We want fully dynamic everything. So I'm going to set this to movable right here. And I am in the search details going to type ray. And I'm going to get this cast ray tracing shadows. I'm going to make sure that that's enabled. So once I have that, I'm going to clear out of this ray here. And I'm going to hold down the Alt button and drag and drop the other light in front of the window. I can also do this by right-clicking, hitting Edit, and then Duplicate. So I can go into the World Outliner and hit F2, or right-click, hit Edit, and Rename if you want to make sure that you stay organized as you go. So I'll select both of these and then drag and drop them into the environment. So now I'm going to take a look at the sun in the environment that came with the template. So we'll take a look outside. You'll see that there is a compass, and when I select that, the sun sky is going to pop up here in the details panel. I'm going to bring this down a little bit to take a look at everything inside. You'll see that when you have the actual sun sky selected, you'll be able to control the location as well as the date. So I'm going to pick spring morning. Let's do March 23rd at 9 a.m. And this sun sky is going to have all the essentials that you need to set up an accurate lighting condition. You have a directional light, which is going to be your sun, but you also have the skylight and sky atmosphere. I'm going to go to that skylight here. I like to lower the intensity to 0.2, but this is a number that you can play with as you are setting up your own lighting. So once I have that set up, I want to take a moment to show something new with Unreal 4.26. So there are these atmospheric clouds that you can bring in. I'm going to go to the left-hand side, go to Visual Effects, drag and drop the volumetric cloud in here. So this is going to allow you to create any type of cloud that you need for your project. Unreal is using a 3-dimensional volume texture that is ray marched to represent cloud layers in real time. Now, there are a lot of different settings you can use, such as having the clouds cast shadows on the ground, as well as casting shadows on themselves. There's a lot of different options that you have, and we aren't going to cover that in today's webinar, but I did want to make you aware of the new feature, and I wanted a nice backdrop for my sky. So now I'm going to go take a look at the directional light with my son, but I'm going to go into the project by clicking 1. And I'm going to go over to the details panel for this sun sky, select the directional light, and I'm going to lower this intensity to 5,000 here. I can also change the source angle number, which determines how large shadow penumbras are on the light. So it's going to control how the directional light's emissive surface extends on a plane relative to the receiver. So this allows you to make the shadows a little bit more diffused. And since we did bring in some clouds, I'm going to soften this up a little bit by changing this source angle to 5. Now, before we continue, we will need to set up a post-process volume so that we can have greater control of our lighting. The template has this set up, so I will go to the outliner, select post-process, and now the great thing about this is I can set up multiple in one space. So say I have a theater that needs to be a little bit moodier, a little bit darker, versus an atrium that's very well lit. I can create 2 different volumes for that space and have it in the same scene. So you'll see that when I come outside, I can see that box going around. Since this scene is just one large open space, I want the box to be unbound. To do this, I can go into the search details, type in extent, and make sure that this is enabled here. Now I'm going to clear out that extent, and I'm going to take a look at the auto exposure. So I'm going to turn that off so that I can have consistent control and more realistic lighting throughout. I'll go to lens in the details panel. This is the post-process volume that I have up. I'm going to scroll down to go to exposure. Now I'm going to turn off the metering mode and change the exposure compensation to 0. I'm then going to change the min EV and the max EV to 5. This number can change with the exposure settings you prefer for the space you are working on. So smaller numbers for interior spaces that do not get as much light, and higher numbers for larger spaces with a lot of windows. This is something you can always change as you work to get the correct exposure. You can also do some color grading in here. So I'll scroll down. I'm going to select that temperature. You can see I can make it warmer if I'd like. I can turn down the saturation a little bit, bump up the contrast. And then you can also play with the color wheels also to kind of get that exact mood and feeling that you want out of the project. There's also options to make it a little bit more realistic. You can add some chromatic aberration in. You can add depth of field, play with your lens flare. Maybe I'll add in a little bit of vignette on the sides of the viewport. And there are a lot of options here, and I won't go over them all, but I do want to bring it up so that you know that you can create a style that you are happy with. Now, I'm going to take a look at the ray tracing features for a few different components here. Just a reminder, this is ray tracing for Unreal, which is a hybrid ray tracer that couples the ray tracing capabilities with our existing raster effects. This essentially means that this is a raster image, and we will be layering it with ray tracing. This will be more realistic, but also more expensive in terms of computational time. So we will want to bring up some stats so that we can keep an eye on this. To do this, I'm going to turn on the frames per second in the top left-hand corner. And I'm also going to hit Stat, Engine, Unit. So you'll see that it pops up with that frame per second on the very top. And then the GPU will also be important to see exactly how much time this is taking to render. So now that I have those stats up, I'm going to always want to be looking at them as I'm making changes to the model. In order to create the illusion of moving images, we need to have a frame rate of at least 15 frames per second. And depending on the platform and deliverable that you have, you're going to want that to be closer to 30 or 60 or even more, as high as possible, to make things very clean and consistent. Now, if you're working on a higher resolution still image, that number can drop down a little bit, but regardless, it's always good to kind of keep that frame per second in mind. Now let's go back to the post-process volume in the world outliner. And I'm going to lock it here underneath the details window. And I'm going to scroll down to the rendering features. I'm going to close up a few things, make it a little bit cleaner. You can do that by going collapse all categories. I'll then open up the rendering features, and I am going to go to the ray tracing ambient occlusion. I'll make this a little bit bigger as we're working through these features. So I'm going to make sure that this is enabled. I'll toggle in between this off and on. You'll see that the frames per second are also changing when I do that. We'll keep it on for now. And then I'm going to scroll down and take a look at the ray tracing global illumination. I'm going to turn this to final gather. If you're looking for something a little more accurate, brute force will be the setting to use. However, it will be a bit more expensive in terms of performance. You'll see that when I filter through these different settings, that the frame rate is changing. So as we are working, it's going to be about proceeding with the right quality and performance. It's about finding the right recipe for that. And now I'm going to go to the ray tracing reflections. So if I scroll down and make sure that this reflections type is ray tracing, I'll go ahead and toggle that between the screen space here and the ray tracing. So you'll see that ray tracing gives it a lot higher fidelity, which I personally love and am excited about. It does change the frames per second though. So one thing that can help you control the performance there is going to be the max roughness, the max bounces, and the samples per pixel. So you'll see that this top number is set to 0.6. So this is the maximum roughness value that ray traced reflections will be visible before falling back to raster methods. So this means that when I put this to 0.3, the materials with a roughness greater than 0.3 will use raster rendering, which is a little less expensive. So this allows you to have control over performance for parts of the project where real-time reflections are not as important. So I'll go ahead and put this back to 0.6. And I'm going to set the samples per pixel to 16. And you're going to see that underneath the table, things get a little bit clearer, but the frames per second increases quite a bit. So I'm going to set this back down to 2 for a little bit of cleanup without impacting our speed. And lastly, I will turn on ray tracing translucency. So let me scroll down. Under type, I'm going to change this to ray tracing, which the back images look great, but the top skylights look like they turned black. So I'm going to bump up the max refraction rays here to try to get more rays to go through the glass. So this is something that you may want to keep in mind while you are building your models, that you're going to want that glass to be a simple plane. I know in some cases it might come in as double geometry, and we'll go over that in a moment. I do want to note that with the max refraction rays, we are getting an undesirable effect here. So for this project, since the glass is not as important, I can turn on this refraction boolean and then turn this off here. So it becomes a little bit clearer there, but it makes it seem as though these back glass panels are now black. This is a situation in which I have 2 of those glass panels. So no problem. Luckily, I can make these changes in Unreal without going back to that original model. I can go to the modes panel on the very top. If you do not have this, you can go to Edit, Plugins, and Type, Modeling, Tools, Editor Mode. You can then enable this and then restart it if needed. So I'll go ahead and select Modes, Modeling, and you'll see that I have a couple different options here. I'm going to select transform, select, and then I'm going to select that outer layer of the glass for each of these. Now I'm going to go to the left-hand side, hit delete triangles, and if I'm happy with my result, which I am, I'm going to hit accept. So now you'll see that it's nice that some reflections came back in, but it doesn't have that Z fighting black effect. Now you may also notice that the barn doors from the Twinmotion file that Martin set up did not come in. At the moment, skeletal meshes and animators from Twinmotion cannot be imported. Without this, you can see that it exposed the door frame that did not have a UVW map set up. We can click on the door frame, go to UV normals, and select UV projection. You'll see on the left-hand side I have a few different options I can choose from: cube, cylinder, and plane. I'm going to keep it at cube, but I'm going to change the size of the checkerboard to be a little bit larger. So I'll select 5 for each of those and hit enter. Now you'll see that the checkerboard did not go away, so it looks like it has a default material applied to it. So to change this material, I'm going to go to the details panel and unlock that post-process volume. And I am going to reselect the door frame. I'll go ahead and scroll up. And I'm going to come to this default material dropdown. And you'll see that I have a lot of materials in here. So these are those Twinmotion materials that are all available to me, which is huge. It means that I don't have to create a bunch of new materials. I can bring the ones from Twinmotion without having to go reapply it in Twinmotion. So I'm going to type in metal. Let me go to the search assets. Looks like we have a couple different options we can choose from. I'm going to pick this MI Glossy Metal Black. If you want to make changes to the material, you can double click it here. Come to the left-hand side, you'll see we have a couple different options. I can change the tint color if I want it to be a little bit lighter. I'll hit OK. I can also change the roughness amount. So now it's set at 0.05. Let me change this to 0.1. You'll see that the reflections become very evident. If I put this at 1, it goes away, and if I put it at 0.5, it has this kind of diffused reflection. So the diffused reflections are going to be a little bit more expensive when you're rendering and might want to be avoided. So that's good to know if you are creating your Twinmotion file. It's actually better if you keep that roughness amount either with a lower number or a high number. Now, I'll set this at 0.3, but this piece of geometry is very small, so it won't have that much effect on the performance. However, if you are working with the floor, you might want to play around with that because it could affect the performance. So I'm going to go ahead and save this and close it. And now say there is a reason that you need to bring in that double pane glass. That is no problem. What we can do is re-import the Datasmith file. So I'm going to go down to the content browser. I'll right-click on the Datasmith scene, and I'm going to hit re-import. Now, the same settings are going to pop up that we saw in the very beginning, but there's going to be 2 new ones. We've got this respawn deleted actors that is going to enable you to have the ability to bring in some of the elements that we deleted. You can also do this with your Twinmotion file. Say an architect is making changes, is changing the layout, the furniture. If the architect is in Twinmotion, saves that original Twinmotion file, you can re-import it the same way. I'm going to demonstrate this with this plant. So if in Twinmotion, the architect or interior designer is editing the pot, say curating a new pot, they did it in Twinmotion, they saved it, you can select the asset, right-click, browse to asset, right-click this here again, and re-import it. And you can select that original file that came in, and it's going to just re-import the original mesh and not the whole thing. Now, nothing happened in this case since there were no changes to that Twinmotion file, but I did want to bring it to your awareness. I also do want to take this moment to move this plant around so we can get a good look at the ray trace shadows and lighting effects. Now, if you want to add in some more Twinmotion entourage, such as plants or office accessories, you can do this already in Unreal. So I'm going to go down to the View options, and I'm going to make sure that this Show Plugin Engine Content is selected. I'm then going to go into the content browser. I'm going to pull up this source panel, and I'm going to search for the Twinmotion to Unreal content. I'm going to go to the library, the furniture, home, and you'll see that all of that entourage that is in the Twinmotion library is now in Unreal. So I'm going to go into the office, accessories, meshes. I'm going to bring in some more highlighters here. Now, the cool thing about this plugin is you do not have to have a Twinmotion file in Unreal to use these assets. So if you're working on a project right now in Unreal where you think you could benefit from being able to pull in these assets, you can download that plugin that Martin showed in the very beginning. So I'm going to show that one more time. If I go to Edit, Plugins, and type in Twinmotion, it's going to be this Twinmotion content right here. Now I'm going to switch to a different file that has the same geometry, but I've spent some time fine-tuning materials, ray tracing performance, and setting up some of the new features. Now that I've switched files, I'd like to quickly show some additional things you can do with your Twinmotion file in Unreal. If you have your own personal library of entourage that includes animated features or characters, you can import that into Unreal using FBX. I'm going to bring in an animated desk fan by coming down to the content browser. I'm going to open up this animations folder I created. I'm going to go to the left-hand side and click Add Import. Go up to Import to Game Animations. And I'm going to select this animated fan. It's going to be important that you have this Import Animations checked, and then you can pick the animation link that you would like. I'll go ahead and import all. I'll close out of this window, and you'll see that a couple new thumbnails popped up at the bottom. I'm going to drag and drop the animation file, which is the one with the green bar at the bottom, into the scene, and I'll use WER to put it in the correct location. You can also do this in the Details tab on the right-hand side by going up to the Transform section, and I will edit the scale here to be 0.5, and then place it on the table. I can apply materials by using the Details panel. I can either hit the drop down and add any of the Twinmotion materials in here, but I can also use files that I've created, such as these materials here. I'll drag and drop these in. I'll go back to the scene and hit play. So it looks like the animation came in quite nicely. Now you can bring in other animated features such as any anima files you might have. If you're not familiar with Anima, it is a 3D software that allows architects to bring in crowds and walking paths with characters. So I would encourage you to go to the AXYZ website to make sure that you have the most recent plugin for Unreal. And once you have everything downloaded, then you can bring in the Anima files by going through the same process we went through, the add import, and then importing the Anima file here. You can also go to Edit, Anima Drop, and open up the Anima gallery. You'll see that I have a few characters here. These are ones that are tied to my Anima account. I'll select the Ready pose and hit Send. And this is going to place the characters in the bottom left under the content browser. It's going to be this AXYZ assets. I'm going to click on this folder and navigate to the meshes. So I can drag and drop this person in, and this is going to be a quick and easy way to get a scale figure inside. Now I'll showcase the multiple post-process volumes that I referenced earlier in the webinar. I'll zoom out of this building and then hit G on my keyboard to bring up the game elements. You'll see that I have a couple different volumes here. As mentioned, this is going to be very helpful if you have a large project in which you need to show different lighting levels. But you can use it as much as you need. So even if I have only one room, this one open space, I can have the 3 different volumes. And I'll zoom in here and you'll see that the black and white aesthetic now is occupying the camera, the space. I'm going to hit G to hide those camera elements. And as I go in through this space, you'll see that it's switching up the visual styles. So you could create post-process materials as well that could give you a tune effect. There's a lot of different variety and options out there that you'll be able to really edit the visual style that you want and need. Now, something that could also be helpful is creating a high-resolution screenshot. So you can navigate to a view that you like, go to the top left-hand corner, select high-resolution screenshot. You can bump up this multiplier here if you would like. I'll keep it at 1 for now. I'm going to hit the camera on the bottom right-hand side. You'll notice that a warning pops up. This is actually just telling me where I saved my screenshot. I'll click on that, and then I can open this up to take a look. Now, say I need a particular resolution or size for that. I can do that by hitting the tilde key on the keyboard. It's going to pop up with the command down here at the bottom. And I'm going to type in high res shot. And I'm going to put in the resolution that I need. So I'll do 4096 by 2304 and hit enter. And it's going to pop up here again with the folder that I have. So now that the second option came in, I now have those two different sizes. Now, if you do have a camera set up for your view, so let me switch to a different camera here. I do want to let you know that it is possible to have render passes. So this feature is in beta and we won't be covering it in depth today, but you can explore it by going to the movie render queue under Windows, Cinematics, Movie Render Queue. You'll see that I have a video shot pulled up here. I'm going to click on the settings to get my configuration correct. You'll see that I already have a few of these in here. So it can render out the lighting, the path tracer, which is going to be similar to an offline render that many of you might be familiar with, as well as reflections. I can add a few more by going to Setting and adding object IDs, or the unlit version, or the non-composited. You can also control the anti-aliasing, as well as console variables. So this is going to be very helpful in creating a very high-resolution image or animation. It's going to allow you to refer to the post-process volume rendering feature settings that we had created earlier in the webinar. And it's going to allow you to max these out without compromising the computation time for real-time scene that you have. So it will bump up these settings for the render, but won't affect the settings in the post-process volume. So I'm going to close out of this and show you the remote control API. To do this, I'm going to switch scenes. So the remote control API is going to allow you to make changes without having to filter through the settings in the Unreal window. So say you have a client or someone in your office who would like to make changes but is not well versed in Unreal. With some initial setup of settings that you would like to make accessible, the person can connect to the local host and make those changes through a web browser on their computer or phone. So you'll see that I have my iPad pulled up here. The remote control system makes this possible by running a web server inside the Unreal Engine that services WebSocket messages and HTTP requests by remote web applications through a REST-like API. So you can operate the engine remotely from a different computer or mobile device that is connected to the same network as the computer running Unreal. So here, let me go over to the side where I have these chairs and rug. I can showcase different options if I'd like. So I'll filter through a few different chair options. Say I want to also take a look at different rugs. I can do that here as well. Or change any of the post-processing effects. So maybe I need to make it a little brighter, make it a little bit warmer, turn up the bloom a little bit. You'll have the ability to access any function that is exposed to Blueprint or Python. So there's a lot of different options you can do, and you could really make this web browser your own. I'm also going to show another remote control setup. So I'm going to switch applications. This is a beta app, and I am going to hit play in my Unreal window. You'll notice that the screen on my computer is now on the screen of my iPad, and I can use my finger to rotate around the space. as well as walk through the space. So this is used in virtual production a lot, but I also think that it has a lot of possibilities for bringing architecture products to life or for presenting your project or idea that you have. For any architects wanting to explore digital twins, augmented reality, lighter point clouds, pixel streaming, then this importer plugin can be a very beneficial tool. Architects can choose Twinmotion today so that they may get the project set up easily. And as your project grows in size and complexity, you'll want to use a tool that has flexibility and control so you can take any idea you have and bring it to life. I know we at Epic are all very excited to see what you talented and creative Twinmotion users can do in Unreal. This is all we have for today. Thanks, y'all.